Shanghai GDG is a very interesting developer community.
I'm glad somebody has asked this question.
This is where the magic happens.
This is primarily a question and answer show. So if any of you out there would like to ask questions.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Google Developers Live. I'm Vic, I work on the Google Drive SDK team. Today I'm going to be going through how to work with Go and the Google Drive SDK. So what we're going to do is walk through our quick start tutorial on writing a command line application in Google's Go language so that we can upload a file to Google Drive by running a simple command. So here I have up the Google Drive SDK documentation, specifically our quick start section, and it enumerates all of the steps that you need to do in order to get running. This tutorial usually takes about 5 minutes or less. I'll see how fast I can do it today. But it pretty much involves 4 steps. You're going to create an API console project in the Google APIs console, enabling the Drive API for that project. You're going to install the Google Go client library. You're going to set up the Go sample, and then you're going to run the Go sample. So if we come down here, the first step is to create an API project in the APIs console, which is linked here. I have it open. So you can come up here and create a new project, and I will call this Google Developers Live. And if I create the project, it just takes a second here. And here we go. So the first thing I have to do in the project is enable the Drive API. So let me just flip that on. And that's it. So now that I've enabled the Drive API, I have to also set up API access. So what we're going to do here is set up our OAuth 2.0 credentials and allow the command line application to actually access Google Drive after the user authorizes a request. So I'm going to click this big blue button here to create an OAuth 2 client ID and Google Developers Live. I don't have a product logo. I'm going to click Next. Now, this is super important. When you get to the client ID settings, you have to select the application type of installed application and not web application. Web application is a little bit different. It's meant for our other flagship sample, which is the Dr. Edit web application sample. But we're not writing a web application today. We're writing a command line application. So that's an installed app. And then it's not an Android or iOS app, so we just choose Other, and then create client ID. And then that's it. So right here, I have the client ID for installed applications, and here you can see my client ID and secret. So these are going to be important in just a few minutes. Once we've got that done, we're done in the Google APIs console. Come back to the documentation. And the next step is to install the Google Go client library. I've already run these commands on my workstation here, but I'm just going to run them again. Nothing's going to happen. So you can see I've already got the Google Go API client library installed. So with that done, the next thing I'm going to do is actually edit the source code. So I've got this source code copied and pasted here into main.go. If I take a look at this, you can see just a bunch of source code. There are 2 things that we have to change in this file. If you download or copy and paste the tutorial code, you'll see these 2 strings here, your client ID and your client secret. These are the only 2 things that you have to change in the source code to get it to work for your application. And what you do is come here to the Google APIs console and copy your installed application client ID and client secret, and then you paste those into the source code where appropriate here. And that's it. So everything else you can leave alone. So I'm going to leave the rest of the source code alone for now, and then we'll come back and look at that in a minute. The other thing we're going to need to do before we can run the sample is actually create a file to upload. So here I've got document.txt, and it says hello world. So that's good enough. And that's the file I'm going to upload. So with that, the last thing to do is actually run the sample, which we document right here. It's this simple command, go run main.go. So if I run this, the first thing the application is going to do is ask me to browse to this URL. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Essentially, we need the application to have an OAuth 2.0 token, and it doesn't have one on the initial run. So because it doesn't have one on the initial run, it asks us as the user to browse to this URL in a web browser, and then click Allow Access. What this is going to do is grant a token to our application. via this authorization code. So we're going to copy this authorization code back into the application, which is here waiting for our input. And with that, the application is going to upload document.txt up into Google Drive. There it is. We can see here that it was created with this ID and this title. So if that's the title, let me go into Google Drive here. And right now you see nothing here. Let me refresh. And here's our document. If I open this up, you can see here that there's no preview available, but this is our test document that was just created. So that's pretty much it for how the sample works. Now let's take a look through the source code and see just what's going on. So if I come back here to the tutorial source code, the first part of the source code primarily is a set of imports and then configuration. The configuration is somewhat important because that's where you set your client ID and secret. Everything else here is not super critical for getting started with this command line application. And then here what we're doing is generating the URL to visit for authorization, which is this step here. It's generating the URL that the user browses to grant an authorization code and get a token for the subsequent requests. So once we do that, we generate that and print it. So go to the following link in your browser, and then there's the auth URL. Once we print it, the user browses to it, and then we receive some input from the user. So we scan that line. And the rest of this is just like error checking if the code doesn't exchange for a granted token or anything like that. So now we create the new authorized Drive client. So this is very straightforward. If there's an error, we show the error. And then we create a new Drive file, and we're going to set its title to my document, as we saw before, and its description to my test document. With that done, we open document.txt with a file pointer, and then all we do is insert the file using the Drive service. And once that's done, we get a JSON representation of that new file back and all of its metadata, including things like ID and title and description. And here, we just want to print out its ID and title. So you can see that that's exactly what was printed out here at the end of the program execution. So that's the Go Quick Start sample. Now, once you've gotten to this point, there are some next steps you could take. So we have full support for, obviously, a number of other features in Google Drive that you can access via the SDK. So once you've gotten the hang of this, I recommend you maybe extend this application to do something like download a file, which is a little bit different, right? So when you download a file, you're going to have to do more than just this one line of code. Like you have to let the user know, or let the user provide you which file to download, and then you have to go and you have to fetch it, getting its download URL, and then downloading the actual contents of the file locally. So that's a little bit different. You could also clean up the authorization mechanism. So right now, as a user of this application, I have to come in here and copy this URL, paste it into the web browser, and then in the web browser I have to click Allow Access and copy the authorization code back into the application. That's pretty tedious for a user. So instead, what we could do is fire up the web browser on behalf of the user. So for instance, we could open Google Chrome directly to the authorization page. And then we could start a local web server on the user's computer in order to have the authorization page at Google redirect back to the user's local computer. And with the web browser running, we could actually receive the authorization code straight from Google. So this means that the user wouldn't have to paste this authorization code into the application, but our web browser that we have running locally would be able to pick it up. So that's something that a lot of people do with an installed application. It's not that hard to do. You just have to start the web browser for the user, which there's plenty of frameworks to do. On Linux, you could, for instance, use XDG open. And then you have to start the local web browser. Again, there's tons of ways to do this, and it's very straightforward. And receive the incoming request and parse out the authorization code. And then you just continue as normal. So essentially, when the user ran this application, they would never see these lines. They would only see their web browser pop up with the authorization page. And when they clicked Allow Access, you could here in your application just continue on uploading the file. So that's pretty much everything for the Go Quick Start. If you have any questions, please find us on Stack Overflow. Our tag is Google-Drive SDK. We're happy to answer anything that you come up with. And if you want to take the next steps into something a little bit more advanced, then definitely check out our Dr. Edit sample applications. Our Dr. Edit sample applications will allow you to write a web app that integrates with Google Drive and exposes your application in the Google Drive user interface, allowing users to access different parts of your application, like create new and open with on a document right there. So that's pretty much it. Thanks very much, and thank you for watching.